People think working the night shift at a hotel is boring, just sitting behind a desk, waiting for the sun to come up. They picture a quiet lobby, a pot of stale coffee, and the occasional lost traveler asking for a room. They don't think about the ones who show up at 3 a.m., sweating despite the cold. The guests who don't want their IDs scanned. The calls from occupied rooms where the system shows no one ever checked in. I worked at the Lexington Hotel for 7 years. It wasn't anything fancy, 3 stories, outdated carpeting, a bar that never had more than 3 customers at a time. We got business travelers too cheap for the Marriott down the street, couples on weekend getaways, and people who had nowhere else to go. I'd seen a lot, too much probably, but I kept coming back. Until the night he checked in. It was a little past midnight when he walked in. Average height, mid-40s, wearing a dark hoodie with the sleeves pulled over his hands. He didn't carry a bag, just a plastic grocery sack clutched in his fist. "Room for the night," he said. His voice was quiet, the kind you had to lean in to hear. "Credit card and ID?" I asked. He slid a $100 bill across the counter. "Cash." I hesitated. We were supposed to take cards only. Too many problems with guests skipping out without paying. But I'd seen my manager break that rule plenty of times, and I wasn't about to argue with someone who wouldn't meet my eyes. I typed a fake name into the system, John Smith, the classic, and gave him a key to room 209. He took it without another word and walked toward the elevator, keeping his head low. I should have trusted my gut and kicked him out, but I didn't. And a few hours later, I made the mistake of checking the cameras. It was around 3 a.m., the dead zone of the night. The lobby was quiet, just the hum of the vending machines and the distant sound of the ice machine spitting out cubes no one had asked for. I was flipping through the security feeds, half out of boredom, when I saw him again. Room 209 was empty, but he was still here. I clicked through the cameras, scanning the hallways. Then I saw him on the West Wing feed, walking down the hall near room 317. His hands were in his pockets, his steps slow but steady. He stopped in front of the door, glanced up the camera, straight at me, and then slid something out of his pocket. A key card. My hands tightened on the desk. I knew for a fact he hadn't come back down for a second room. I would have seen him. Yet the card worked. The light blinked green, and the door opened. He disappeared inside. I grabbed the phone and dialed the room. The call rang and rang, but no one answered. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he knew someone in that room. Maybe he was meeting someone. Then I checked the system. Room 317 was vacant. What the cameras showed, I had 2 choices: call security or check the footage. Most rooms didn't have cameras inside, but a few did, only pointing at the entrance, mostly for liability reasons. If a guest claimed someone broke in or maintenance walked in unannounced, there had to be proof. Room 317 was one of those rooms. I pulled up the footage. At first, it was just an empty hotel room. A neatly made bed, curtains drawn shut, TV off. The camera angle covered only the entrance and a small part of the closet, leaving most of the room unseen. Then the door opened. He stepped inside and closed it behind him. For a long time, he just stood there, his back to the camera, hands still in his pockets. Then, slowly, he turned his head, not toward the bed, toward the closet. I clicked to the next few minutes of footage. He walked over and opened the closet door, stared inside, and then, in a motion so fast I barely saw it, he lunged forward. The screen shook. He was pulling something, dragging it. Someone. There were legs, kicking, a muffled cry. I hit pause, my fingers rigid on the keyboard. Room 317 was supposed to be empty. It wasn't. I don't remember making the call to security, but they were there within minutes. I left the desk, meeting them outside room 317. The door was unlocked. The room was empty. No sign of him. No sign of the man he took. Just a single hotel robe on the floor, the belt missing. We checked the cameras again. The footage from inside room 317? Gone. The hallway feed? Corrupted. It cut to static just as he opened the door. The only proof I had was what I saw with my own eyes. One of many I didn't quit. I should have, but I didn't. I showed up the next night like always, watching guests come and go, pretending I hadn't seen what I saw. In 7 years, I had witnessed some terrifying things, but this was one of the creepiest experiences of my life. Working night shifts at a hotel teaches you a few things. You learn that people lie for no reason. You learn that some guests check in with one name and leave with another. And you learn that, after a certain hour, no one standing outside your front doors has a good reason to be there. Back in 2018, when I still worked at the Wilshire Inn, a mid-range hotel off the interstate, I had plenty of unsettling encounters. Business travelers, overnight stops, the occasional couple trying to save money on a weekend trip, normal guests. But we also got the ones who stayed long-term, paid in cash, and never said what they did for work. Some of them I got used to. Others, I still think about. Like the man who stood outside room 308. It was a little past midnight when she arrived, mid-30s, carrying one of those rolling suitcases that had seen better days. Dark hair tied back, a pair of glasses slipping down her nose as she dug through her purse for an ID. "One night," she said. "Any preference on the floor?" I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Somewhere quiet." I gave her 308, end of the hall, away from the elevators. She thanked me, took the key, and wheeled her suitcase toward the lobby doors. I didn't think about her again until the phone rang 2 hours later. "There's a man outside my door." I was half asleep in my chair when the call came in. "Front desk," I said, rubbing my eyes. Silence. Just breathing. Then in a whisper, "There's a man outside my door." I sat up. "Do you know him?" "No." I grabbed my notepad. "What's he doing?" "Just standing there." A pause. "He knocked once, but he's not saying anything." I glanced at the guest list. Only 5 rooms were booked on the 3rd floor. 3 were single men, all with different last names. "Can you describe him?" I asked. A long silence. Then, tall. Light-colored jacket. Hood up. "Did he follow you to your room?" "I don't think so." She hesitated. "I don't know." I left the desk and took the stairs up, my hand tight around the set of keys in my pocket. The hallway was dim, lit by the yellow glow of wall sconces spaced too far apart, empty. I walked past 308, the door locked, no one in sight. The only sound was the soft buzz of a vending machine at the end of the corridor. I knocked once. "It's the front desk." A pause, then the door cracked open just enough for me to see her face. "He's gone," I said. "No one's here." Her fingers tightened around the edge of the door. "I swear he was there." "I believe you," I said, and I did. But without anyone to confront, I didn't know what else to do. "If he comes back, call again." She nodded. I waited for her to lock the door before heading back downstairs. I should have stayed longer, should have listened to that feeling that something wasn't right. Because less than an hour later, she called again. "He came back." I picked up on the first ring. "He came back," she whispered. "He's standing closer." I didn't ask questions this time. I grabbed the emergency phone, the one connected to security, and took the stairs 2 at a time. I was faster this time. Less than a minute had passed. But the hallway was empty again. The door to 308 was shut. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again, louder. "It's me." A shuffling sound. Then the door opened a fraction. She looked different now, eyes darting behind me, shoulders tense. "Did you see him?" she asked. "No one's here." She exhaled sharply and opened the door a little wider. "I don't understand. He was right there." I believed her, but I also couldn't do anything unless the man was caught in the act. "Do you want a different room?" I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Somewhere near the elevators." I grabbed a key to 212, handed it to her, and walked with her downstairs while she clutched her suitcase tight. She barely spoke after that, just thanked me and locked herself in 212. I told myself it was over, that maybe it was some misunderstanding. Then I went back to the 3rd floor. The hallway was still empty, but when I turned the corner to head back to the stairs, I saw something on the ground. A single key card. Face up, right where the man had been standing. I picked it up, flipped it over. Room 308. I looked at the door, still locked. I knocked again, just in case. No answer. But when I pressed my ear against the wood, I swore I heard something inside. A shuffle. The faintest creak of the bed frame. A breath. I took a step back, my fingers gripping the key card. I had just moved her out of this room, and someone was still inside. I didn't go back to the front desk. I didn't hesitate. I called security right there in the hallway. They arrived within minutes. Checked 308. The door was still locked from the inside. When they finally forced it open, the, 'The room was empty. Bed unmade, lights still on. Nothing missing. Just a single key card. except the extra hotel robe. And when I checked our system again, something made my skin crawl. The key card I found hadn't been hers. The room had been cleaned and reset hours before she checked in, meaning someone else had taken that key, and I never saw them leave. Before we dive into the next story, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world to us. Thanks for watching. There are some hotels where people go to sleep, and others where people go to die. The Holloway Inn was somewhere in between. It was the kind of place where the hallway carpets were permanently stained, where the front desk computer still ran on an ancient system, and where guests rarely made eye contact. 5 years of working the night shift taught me that this hotel wasn't a destination. It was a stopgap, a place for truckers, drifters, and people who didn't want to be found, and sometimes people who never left. I wasn't there the night it happened. It was before my time, 10 years ago, when the hotel had a different name and a different owner. But the story was passed down through the staff like a ghost tale. A man checked in alone, asked for a quiet room, and paid in cash. He was found 2 days later, hanging from the ceiling fan in room 517. No note, no ID. Just a man who had decided, for whatever reason, that this was the place to end his life. They remodeled the room after that. New number on the door, fresh paint, but everyone who worked there knew which one it was. I never thought much about it, till the second man checked in. It was a little past 2 a.m. when he walked in. Something about him immediately put me on edge, not because he looked dangerous, but because he didn't look like anything at all. His clothes were plain, unremarkable. No jewelry, no watch, not even a phone in his hand. He carried nothing. No luggage, no backpack, not even a plastic bag from a gas station. It was like he had appeared out of nowhere. He stood at the desk without moving, hands resting at his sides like he was waiting for something. "Checking in?" I asked. "Yeah." His voice was flat, tired, but not the usual exhaustion I saw in night travelers. This was something else. "Just one night," he added. I pulled up the system. Name? There was a long pause. Too long. Then, Thomas Gray. It sounded made up, like he had pulled it from somewhere, or maybe practiced it beforehand. Still, I nodded and started processing the check-in. "How will you be paying?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick wad of cash, too much for a single night's stay. But instead of peeling off the right amount like most people, he counted it, carefully, slowly. It wasn't hesitation, it was deliberation, as if the amount needed to be exact. I slid the key across the desk. "Need help with anything?" "No." He picked up the key but didn't move right away. He just stood there, not looking at me, not looking at anything, really. Then, without another word, he turned and walked toward the hallway, disappearing into the dimly lit corridor. Something about the entire interaction stayed with me. It wasn't just that he had paid in cash. It wasn't even the fake name. It was that he hadn't asked a single question. Most guests wanted to know about checkout times, Wi-Fi, breakfast. Even the ones passing through for a night at least glanced around the lobby to get their bearings. But not him. He already knew exactly where he was going. Morning shifts were always the worst, mostly because I was too tired to care. But that morning, something felt off. Housekeeping was late, so I went upstairs myself to check the rooms that had checked out. The hallway was silent. Most guests were still asleep, their doors shut tight. I found the housekeeper, Rosa, a woman who had worked there longer than I had. She was pushing her cart down the hallway, pulling out a key card to open one of the rooms. 517 still occupied? I asked. She checked her list. Supposed to be empty. We walked to the door together. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder. Still nothing. I pulled out my master key. "I'll check." Rosa stood behind me as I pushed the door open, and the first thing I noticed was the smell. Not just the stale air of an unventilated room. Something worse. I stepped inside, and that's when Rosa screamed. She stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth. Then right there in the hallway, she threw up. I didn't blame her, because Thomas Gray was hanging from the ceiling fan. His coat was neatly folded on the chair, his shoes lined up beside the bed, and on the desk, next to the lamp, sat the room key. The police came, just like they had a decade earlier. They asked the same questions, took the same photos. His ID was fake. No phone, no wallet. Just a man who had checked in and never planned to check out. They asked if I had noticed anything strange about him. I wanted to say yes, that everything about him had felt wrong, that he had moved like someone with no past and no future. But I didn't. I just gave them the facts. By noon, they had zipped him up, and by evening, the room was cleaned. No investigation, no follow-up, just another forgotten guest. One of the creepiest nights I ever had. A week later, they changed the room number again. Fresh coat of paint, new bed frame, like it never happened. But I still remember his voice, still remember the way he counted his cash too carefully, and still remember how when I checked the logs later, I realized something terrifying. He had asked for that room specifically. This was just one of the many disturbing things I saw in my years working the night shift, but it was one of the creepiest.